Focus. Ideate. Innovate. Enable.
The Emerging India Awards for 10 glorious years now have continued to recognize SMEs who are striving to create world-class products and services, setting high benchmarks and optimizing opportunities across the globe.
CNBC TV18 and ICICI have instituted these awards jointly for the star performers in the small and medium enterprises sector. SSIs have been a very important part of India's economic growth story.
Emerging India Awards are a great symbol for the India that exists today. All the world great businesses were once SMEs, and I can say that with some certainty that some companies which will be members of the Fortune 500 in 25 years' time are SMEs today.
I would wish all our winners once again all the best. The future of India is in our hands, mainly yours, a little bit us.
I am truly honored to be amongst people who will create India of the future.
With 1 million entries received over 10 years, the Emerging India Awards are truly a benchmark of Indian SME excellence. Over these years, the Emerging India series has chronicled the inspirational stories of Indian SMEs and provided a befitting platform and voice to the engines of the Indian economy.
It was very gratifying to see that you have this representative sample from the small-scale industries, which is very confident about the future, tremendous amount of positive energy, and that in the current atmosphere is something which I feel very happy.
Need these awards in order to celebrate success. These are the future, companies which are going to be emerging into bigger league and so on.
We kickstart the 10th edition of the Emerging India series with a power-packed rendezvous with the MD and CEO of ICICI Bank, Chanda Kochhar.
Hello and welcome to the CNBC TV18 Emerging India Awards. I'm Shereen Bhan. This is a milestone year for us because the Emerging India Awards are in their 10th year. For 10 years now, CNBC TV18 in partnership with ICICI Bank has been celebrating the spirit of entrepreneurship in India's small and medium enterprises. We've created the country's largest platform to recognize and reward Indian SMEs. Joining us today for this special conversation is Chanda Kochhar. Chanda, appreciate you joining us. As I said, it is a milestone year, 10 years of celebrating the entrepreneurial success of Indian SMEs.
Indeed it is, and I think one that we've been kind of watching it and celebrating it for 10 years, but the second also is that actually one has seen that those entities that were pretty small and yet good 10 years ago, many of them have emerged and emerged into that next size, so to say, which is very good to see.
How different is the environment for SMEs, the operating environment for SMEs today in terms of bank credit, in terms of credit rating, for instance? Because as we've been tracking this story over the last 10 years, that has been a pain point.
I think lots of things are changing in the operating environment. To start with, I would say the way we live and our demography. As we are seeing more and more young Indians and young India, we are actually seeing young entrepreneurs emerging. And I think that's the most important factor for the SME. So, below the age of 30, below the age of 40, people's abilities to try out new things, new ventures, take new risks. I think, the entire entrepreneurial culture, I think, augurs very well for the growth of the SME sector. The second is, the overall ecosystem in terms of social mobility, digitization and so on. I think that itself is opening up just new opportunities for small and micro enterprises, whether it's around the social media, whether it's the Olas or cabs of the world or the Zomatos or anything to do in that new way of living is throwing up new opportunities for the SMEs. Talking particularly on the bank credit, I think clearly again banks are also moving away from just number-based analysis to a more 360-degree kind of an analysis. So, for instance, we do a more comprehensive analysis of the SMEs, not just talking of the numbers, but the trade references, the references from their suppliers, from their buyers, also a whole lot of data analytics today enables you to do an assessment of the micro and the small enterprises, which in the past was not possible. So I think there also, the whole world has evolved quite a bit.
Since we're talking about the potential of this sector and the Prime Minister's dream of Make in India, imperative for the Make in India dream to be realized is going to be, setting up a global supply chain. We've seen that happen as far as specific sectors are concerned. Auto, for instance, where we've done a good job in terms of being able to create that global supply chain. But what more you think needs to be done?
Make in India, or the opening up of various sectors for FDI investment, or the Skill India, I think together augur very well for the SME sector. For instance, one may presume that FDI is really in the most complicated sectors like the defense and the railways and so on. But a lot of the work underlying gets done through the supply chain, where the SMEs play a very important role. Many don't know that, but a whole lot of critical work even for the Mars mission was really contributed by the SMEs. So we are today seeing that even in the defense sector, some very niche construction, some very niche part of supply chain, the SMEs are already starting to see some activity. So I think that's one part where the new sectors have been opened up. The second, as you rightly said, just in general Make in India. We are seeing even, the supply chains across the agriculture sector, the supply chains across some of the very simple consuming sectors. For example, perfume bottles being filled with perfumes. I think that is where the SME sector is now playing a bigger and bigger role.
And we talk about the ease of doing business, and specifically as far as the Indian SME sector is concerned, that again has been one of the pain points. The number of approvals that you're required to get, the number of local plus, municipal agencies that you have to deal with, and so on and so forth. Do you believe that special attention needs to be given to this sector, even when it comes to the ease of doing business? And of course, that will help if we move towards larger digitization across platforms.
Yes, I think ease of doing business is even more important for SMEs because they do not have that large an ecosystem of their own to wade through the various approvals required. But so in that context, again, if you see the government's efforts of actually digitizing most of the approvals that are required to start new business and so on, in fact, I think work more towards the ease of doing business for SMEs rather than even the bigger companies. So clearly ease of doing business is very important, but these efforts should make a lot of difference.
In terms of ICICI Bank and your own aspirations to cater to the SME sector, what is the current exposure? What are your plans as far as the sector is concerned? And you talk to technology companies, everyone is eyeing this space. When you talk to banking companies, what is the sense that you get?
So SME business has always been about 5 to 6% of our total exposure. Continues to be so, continues to grow at a similar rate at what the rest of our domestic business is growing. But I think the good part is that instead of this exposure again being concentrated in a few sectors or in a few SMEs, we are seeing a large number of newer and newer entities emerge, a large number of newer and newer entities wanting to go that extra mile and take that next step in growth terms and so on. So we are now able to see more entities with whom we could do business. That's one part. The second, as I said, is it's also very satisfying to see that over the last few years, say for instance even 10 years history if one takes of these awards, if you track the history of some of those companies, it's very satisfying to see that they are now getting into the next stage of growth and development.
How are you reading the startup movement in India?
I think the fact that the entrepreneurship culture is gaining more and more ground in India, I think augurs very well for the economy.
From a bank's perspective, how has it been different to deal with the SME sector, both in terms of business processes and in terms of approach? And how are we likely to strategically see that evolve as you sort of see this space expand and evolve?
Yeah, so we've always, kind of believed that, first of all, SMEs do need a different approach. And it's not just about looking at it from a bank's point of view of only lending, but it's about the entire transactional relationships, because for the SMEs, even the ease of doing business, so to say, of opening of the daily LCs and small guarantees across the counter and so on and so forth, or just small forex transactions make a lot of difference in terms of their ease of doing the banking business. So I think we've approached the whole SME relationship as being a very comprehensive relationship, where the rest of the non-lending relationship is as equally important. The second is that we've gradually improvised on our ways of looking at the SMEs and assessing them. As I said, looking at the ecosystem in a much broader manner, seeing how we do an analysis and an appreciation of the SMEs outside of just the financial numbers. The third is that as the new age economies are coming up, so one talks of technology, one talks of innovation and so on, everything around that value chain that comes up, both in terms of business opportunities. So if it's e-commerce, the entire value chain, logistics, etc., becomes an opportunity in terms of business, but it also throws up possibilities of use of technology to assess SMEs. So we're tying up with a lot of e-commerce companies, where the small suppliers to these e-commerce companies, a lot of our assessment then just gets done on the basis of the underlying data that is available of transactions between these very small companies and the e-commerce companies.
You were talking about the promise that the Indian startup ecosystem is showing at this point in time. You talked about the possibilities that the shared economy has thrown up as well. How are you reading the startup movement in India? There are concerns about valuations. There are concerns about whether easy money has fueled the kind of valuations that we're currently seeing. Is this a bubble or not? Are we likely to see a significant cutting down, so to speak, as far as a lot of these companies are concerned? What is your own sense about what's going on?
So let me break this up into the entrepreneurship movement and the valuations. I think the fact that the entrepreneurship culture is gaining more and more ground in India, I think augurs very well for the economy, because we've actually seen lesser small innovation in India compared to, say, some of the other parts of the world, whereas we have the talent, we have the capability, we have the receptiveness to technology, we have the capability to innovate and so on. So I think this boom in entrepreneurship capability and intent and thinking, I think augurs very well for India. Talking on a separate note about valuations, I clearly think that we really have to closely watch the business model of many of these new innovative business ideas. Currently, I think the whole euphoria is around the possibilities of growth and possibilities of opportunities, but finally the valuations.
Overdone?
So I think finally the right valuations would depend on the underlying profits, revenues and business models. And wherever there are underlying business models flowing and underlying business transactions flowing, I think the valuations will come out of that. Just valuations arising out of either eyeballs or contacts or, I think to some extent will start fading away.
So within this space, what is looking most exciting to you? You were talking about the Ola Cabs business model. There's the Uber, there's the Ola Cabs of the world. Then, of course, there's the entire e-commerce gamut, the Flipkarts and Snapdeals of the world. Within this space, in terms of profit visibility, in terms of revenue generation, in terms of sound business models, what looks most exciting to you? What would you put your money on?
No, I think actually we're looking at across various of these sectors. I think the underlying factor here has to be the genuine revenue model, underlying. So it's not just about facilitating, something, but actually is there a revenue flow underlying, and therefore through that revenue flow is there a profit, arising for the entity. So I think that becomes very important. But, there are various of these business models where there is this genuine increase in business activity taking place. And if there is a business activity and there's an underlying profit to the entity, that is what is.
But do you worry that at this point in time there's too much emphasis and too much focus on valuation? This has now become a valuation story as opposed to actually building a business story?
I won't say worry or not, but I would say that the final sustainability of any of this entity would depend on creating that underlying revenue and profit story. It cannot remain infinitely just on the basis of hope. I think it has to, it's good to have the hope to start with, but it has to get translated into the underlying revenue.
What is it about the Indian financial services sector that we have so many women at the top?
India genuinely, I think, does not have that amount of discrimination between men and women, in most of the organizations.
Again, talking about SMEs, and this is what we've captured over the last 10 years on Emerging India. A lot of people feel that in terms of policy intervention, the time has perhaps come that the government doesn't incentivize SMEs to actually stay small. What do you believe is the required intervention at this point in time, given the many objectives that we have?
No, I think, some of these movements or migrations will actually happen because of the momentum of the economy itself. I think the natural forces that can actually push growth and give you the opportunities of the growth will be and should be stronger than those smaller incentives that remain, that become relevant if you remain small. And I think that's what we have to hope for. Some of these entities should become so large as a part of a large supply value chain globally. Some of these entities should become so large because of their innovative ideas and so on, and the possibility of scaling up that India offers given its size of economy and the consumption and so on. And I think that's what we should hope for, and I think that is where the real success of the SMEs would lie. That some small incentives should actually feel very small, and it's the growth opportunity that should become the bigger opportunity.
So in the 10th year, Chanda, what is it that you're going to be looking forward to as far as the Emerging India Awards are concerned?
Well, I think, we are very excited because every year we've seen more and more growing interest from the SME sector, and that itself shows that the vibrancy in the SME sector is increasing, and more people are becoming aware of this and participating in this and so on and so forth. But what's very different and even more exciting this year is that, one, there are so many varied segments where in the past you had not seen SMEs emerge. The second is that now, we ourselves have the ability to go out there and mine our data and look for SMEs who may or may not have applied. And the third is that, our teams are actually now going to various cities to do kind of first a local analysis of, what the best SMEs could be. And then from there we kind of create a shortlist and then look at the final winners. And I think the final thing is that, which is also exciting, is to track back a 10-year journey and say, which are those which have continued to shine and have actually grown.
As they're calling them.
Absolutely.
What has been the high point for you over this 10-year journey as we've tracked Emerging India?
I think the fact that, in a way, the initial belief that we started with, that SMEs deserve and need a more full transactional approach rather than just a lending approach, and that approach has kind of stood the test of times. I think that's one good and satisfying factor. And the second is that actually, as the economy has grown and evolved and changed, there are these different pockets opening up for the SME sector as well, backed by the entrepreneurship capability in India, which is allowing many of them to flourish.
A lot of viewers asking us this on social media, that what is it about the Indian financial services sector that we have so many women at the top? You're heading India's largest private sector bank. A lot of your former colleagues from ICICI Bank are heading places like JP Morgan, Axis Bank, and so on and so forth. I think the representation of women leaders in the financial services sector in India across regions would perhaps be the highest anywhere in the world. Why is that?
I think it's indeed the highest, and one is let's celebrate two things. As far as I'm concerned, we should celebrate two things. One is the fact that India has been able to create this big benchmark, which is a benchmark by any global standards. The second is that a lot of this talent has been created and nurtured within ICICI.
Well, that's right. But why do you think that India has been able to achieve this kind of a success, where even the developed economies like the US and Europe haven't?
Again, I would say two things. One is, India genuinely, I think, does not have that amount of discrimination between men and women, in most of the organizations. But I think the bigger
You really
reason,
believe that we're a meritocracy?
I think so. I think, the corporate sector, as women come in, I would say that, there's a lot of difference between the number of women joining in when 30 years ago to today. Today there are many more joining in. But I think there is a lot of corporates that are actually genuinely turning meritocracies rather than having biases against women. And the second more important factor, I think, as far as banking sector is concerned, is that if you just look at the last 30-40 years history, banking sector has been one of those first sectors where more women started working in India compared to various other sectors. And I think
was it more sort of to do with the fact that, it was seen traditionally as the safer sector, 9-to-5 job? I mean, how
a
do
lot
you
of public
explain
sector units and so on, probably. So I think it was because of all that there were traditionally many more women in banking than any other, and which means that there therefore has been a pipeline, and their women have kind of spent those so many years and moved through the various levels, and there is therefore a strong pipeline to choose from when it comes to the top. And I therefore believe that many more sectors in India will go through this, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, as more and more girls and women have started looking at various other sectors.
Well, congratulations to ICICI Bank on being able to create that pipeline of women leaders. And Chanda, thank you very much for joining us on CNBC TV18. And we wish you and, of course, the entire team at CNBC TV18 and ICICI Bank the very best of luck as we roll out the 10th edition of the Emerging India Awards. Appreciate your time. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this special show from all of us here on the team. Goodbye. Many thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the Emerging India Awards.